Good afternoon. We are here to celebrate the life and mourn the death of Cora Sue Collins Swords. Horsewoman, farmer, weatherwoman, wedding planner, house builder, artist, spiritualist, mother, grandmother, wife, and friend. She lived a full life. We will miss her. Let us remember the span of her life, a full and rich life, a life well lived. Let us draw strength and comfort in each other's company.
Thank you each for being here. Let's just get started. My wife made it easy. In about 2008, she had her 50th high school reunion, and they were instructed to write the story of their life. So Devorah will now share Cora's story.
I'm Devorah. I am not Cora, but I'm going to read her story in her words. My life has been full for the last 50 years. The first year after graduation, I went to Arizona State University, and I took animal husbandry, design, drafting, and horticulture, for I knew I would need them in my life. The next year, I moved to Trinity County at Coffee Creek and married my good friend, Howard Palmer. We built my first home. We started a business of taking people on horses in the Trinity Alps for fishing, hunting, and vacations. We had a string of 33 horses and mules. It was really interesting to read all this. My daughter Carlene came along. She's my helper. We took care of people and the horses, had an organic garden, and raised all our own meat. I was on the school board, and in the winter I worked at the local grocery store and sewed all of our clothes. After 9 years, I lost my husband to mercury poisoning, and he was shot in the back. Then I moved to Marin County and became a waitress at Sabella's so I could raise Carlene. I tired of that after 3 years, so we moved to St. Helena, which I enjoyed. I was a grocery clerk and took people on picnics touring wineries. I studied winemaking, accounting, and had Bible studies. After 7 years, I got the itch to move back to Coffee Creek, where Michael Swords opened my car door and said hello. That was the beginning of a 32-year relationship. He is a house builder and a minister, so I stepped into running a family construction business. I realized I enjoyed helping people with health of body, mind, and soul, so I studied and researched for more information. I learned the mysteries, continued studying diet, learned hands-on healing, and I also helped with weddings. This is amazing, Michael. We moved 35 times because of the housing market. We moved from Trinity to Humboldt, Siskiyou, Shasta counties, Palo Alto, San Diego, and are now back in the country. I've traveled for 2 weeks up to 2.5 months at various times all over Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador, Belize, Costa Rica, New Mexico, and Michael and I visit his family in Ohio. I had the pleasure of playing with my grandsons as they grew up, Arlie and Rayleigh and Emil. I also painted lots of houses with my son-in-law, David, who's here. I oil paint on canvas and do watercolor, and I will just say there's some of her paintings out behind the curtains. I still sew clothes and am now learning to play the folk harp. I now have a huge organic garden and am refurbishing the house we live in. I love going out to lunch and visiting with people. I dance and do yoga. For the most part, I have enjoyed life, definitely trusting God and my intuition. And I just want to add from me, Devorah, this woman must have never sat still.
Well, because that was 15 years ago or so, I have to make some editorial comments. First of all, her husband, Howard. I met Howard the very first day I moved to Coffee Creek. We were very good friends. To many, he was just the town drunk, but it was 15 years later that we found out he was dying of mercury poisoning. They ran horses in the summertime, but in the winter, you got to do something. And couple winters, he worked in a ore mine, and they used the mercury to separate the ore they were after. And of course, he rolled his own cigarettes, so he was ingesting this mercury. And again, it was 15 years later, there was a program on Dr. Quinn, medicine woman. That's where we first got the inkling, and then we went to our local doctor and got the lowdown. So anyhow, one day while staying at his folks' property out of Reading, he discovered a group of horses that were running loose. After realizing they had escaped through a broken fence, he corralled the horses, took them to another secure pasture, and locked them up. Well, someone saw him doing this, and they called the sheriff. So he was, let me get back to my thing here. After realizing that they had escaped the pasture through a broken fence, he corralled the horses into another secure pasture. However, someone called the sheriff's office, and he was arrested for stealing horses. Shortly thereafter, the person who filed the complaint learned the true story and withdrew their complaint, but Howard was a little bit of a unwanted sort of person. The sheriffs didn't like him, so they continued with the arrest. Howard approached Cora and said if she would pay the $500 bail, he would give her his 1/3 property in the family acreage there out of Reading. But then Howard skipped bail. He spent the summer of 1975 hiding out in the Trinity Alps. When the weather turned cold, he returned to Happy Valley. Howard's brother happened to drive by. He would check on the property every once in a while. He noticed there was smoke coming out of the chimney, so he called the sheriff's department. Two deputies showed up at midnight to arrest, well, he had already been arrested, but to get Howard. Howard was paranoid. He hated cops. He hated anything like that. One cop went out to the car to get something, so they were alone. There was no power in the house. Howard tried to escape, and he was shot in the back. I needed to explain that. The daughter, Carlene, could have sued. We met with a lawyer and everything, but we decided, Carlene decided to settle out of court. So we didn't pursue it. Okay, a second comment on her thing. We first came to Ahahik in 1979. Cora had a cousin who was a buyer for Folk Art International in San Francisco, and she had a house here in Ahahik, and had been bugging Cora for years to come and visit her, but we finally had the opportunity to come down. I accompanied Cora on all of those trips listed in the introduction, except I didn't go to Ecuador and I didn't go to Oaxaca. But, so first picture, Charlie. This is the cousin. They're on about 7,000 feet on a big mountain out of Quito, Ecuador. This was one of their trips. Third comment is she mentioned it. She mentioned that she made all of her clothes. There's a few articles out here for you to look at. But next picture, Charlie. That was the wedding dress she made for David and Carlene's wedding. She was really quite talented. Next picture, it was mentioned that she was a wedding planner. Here she is, she's the one way at the back leading, and her niece is getting married. This was in the Dunsmuir City Park. And then, by the way, this is cousin Sharon in the, and being escorted down the aisle or up the aisle, and as the case may be. Cora, and she mentioned that Cora and her husband had a pack string. Next picture, Charlie. This is actually a picture of Cora and her husband about 1961 or 62. They put it on a postcard. Next picture, Charlie. But this is the wife and I and about 3 other couples. For about 3 or 4 years, we made a habit of going in the mountains. So this is us being packed. She continued to pack even after Howard was gone. The new packer came in, and he needed help, and she was excellent help. So she did a lot of that. Then she mentioned house design. She actually studied under Frank Lloyd Wright at the University of Arizona. So first house picture. This was for Dr. Paul Miller. We designed and built this house. Another picture, the other side. Yes. Next, Charlie. This is a friend of ours. We had a house burned down. This carpenter who worked for me, about a year later, his house burnt down. And this is, we designed and helped them build this house. Next, Charlie. This was the daughter, David and Carlene's house in Etna, California. Next picture, Charlie. That's the other end, other side of it, all done. Okay. Next picture. This was a spec house. I'm going to talk about it later, but I cut my thumb off, and the only way we could find to survive was we owned a lot, and the bank loaned us money to build a spec house. One more picture, Charlie. That's the back of it. But the spec house was what allowed us to come to Ahahik in 1979. Next, Charlie. This is our own house that we built after the fire. It's not a very good picture, but it's a good lead into the gardens. You notice all the tulips and roses. She had always said Cora had 10 green thumbs. She could make anything grow. Okay, Charlie. There's a picture of it from another angle in the winter. But again, gardening. Next picture, please. One got missed. That's our second house. That was our second house that we didn't build it, but we lived in it. That was outside of Etna. Next, this was our third and final house. This is where we moved from a year ago. That was a picture, a partial picture of the garden. And then, Charlie, there's a couple pictures showing produce. Typical, go ahead. Typical of the stuff that she grew all the time. Next. When we got ready, in 1979, they closed the forest because of the spotted owl. And that's why we moved so many times. We actually managed, I hung on till 1983. But when we started moving, you'll notice I built all these flower boxes, and we moved the flower boxes with us. So, I guess that's it. No, there's one more there. So having heard her story in her own words, I wanted to share with you some of what some other people said. This is a picture of Cora and Joyce, our very good friend. I just want to read you real quick what she said. Cora Sue was one of my oldest and dearest friends. I smile when remembering all the good times we had, and it's like a soft, warm blanket of comfort. We send our love and sorrow for her passing. And then she had a sister, and together they had a timeshare, and we took several vacations together, but this is what her sister said. "We will remember Cora as the intelligent, fun to be with friend. She had a special place in our lives. She will be missed. We send our love and hope that our paths will cross again." And then I wanted to read, this is what, I think I'll save that because I'm going to talk about that later. But I do want to read a card from my mother. My mother is a very special person, and she doesn't just give you any card. When she gives you a card, so listen to what she said about Cora Sue. "Any woman can be a daughter-in-law, but it takes a certain spirit and openness and generosity of heart to make the in-law part fall away, leaving that comfortable word, daughter. You are a caring person, a loving wife, a giving mother, and your presence in the life of our family is simply a gift." So now I'd like to do a quick genealogy. Charlie? The first picture. There we go. The man on the right is Cora's great-grandfather. I don't know very much about him. He worked in the woods. His left arm isn't showing. He had lost part of his left arm. Again, I don't know very much about him. Next picture, please. This is Cora Sue's mother, Mildred. The story we got was that she was born on a riverbank right in Florida, right where it goes over to the Panhandle. There's a river comes down. Once a time I knew the name, but supposedly she was born on a riverbank. I don't know, but I always assumed that she had some Indian because you notice it doesn't show, but she was dark complected. Cora tended to be a little dark complected, especially after she was a sun worshiper, especially after time in the sun. Okay, next picture. Now this side of the family I know a lot more about because one of the cousins did a study and published everything. This is Cora Sue's grandmother, fraternal grandmother, Cora Lulu Ball. Another picture, please. She, I better read my notes here. Before moving to Auburn with her family at 20 years old, she had completed her schooling at the Eastern School of Oratory. She married George P. Collins. Next picture. Very terrible picture, but he's the one next to the horse, the one right in the middle of the picture. But he was quite a guy. He was a businessman and a civic leader in Auburn, very active in a large number of organizations and companies, culminating in election to Placer County Board of Supervisors. But he died prematurely at 45 years of age on October 31st, 1917. Cora Lulu was primarily a quiet homemaker who died November 1941 at 68 years old, visiting Cora's father in San Francisco. Next, Charlie. They had 4 boys, starting from left to right. I knew all of these people. From left to right, there was Keith. He was mostly in radio and advertising in south of Sacramento, around Stockton. Next comes the next brother. Can you go back? Yeah. Calvin. The next one was Calvin. He was the president of the Bank of America at Stanford, the big shopping center there, and the big Bank of America. Next is George. never knew really what George did. I think he was in sales and that sort of thing. And then the final one is Cora's father, Ken Collins. Okay, now the next picture. That picture was in about 1975 or something like that. This one was in 1951 with the whole family. Cora's in there, her mother and her father, and all their kids. So. Kenneth and Mildred were married in the mid-30s. So next picture. They had a son Kenny, and Cora Sue. There they are as babies. Charlie. This was prom night or some kind of demolay function, I don't know, as they've got older. Next, Cora's graduation picture. Next, this is Cora and her first husband, Howard. She's really pretty even in that picture, isn't she? Next picture. This was them, Howard and Cora, with Carlene. And off in the corner, you can see the first house that Cora built. Okay, Charlie? This is Carlene's graduation picture from Trinity High School, Weaverville, California. Next. When we came in 1979, we stayed for 2-week vacation. Carlene stayed for about 6 months. Then she came home. Then she came back, stayed for another 6-8 months. And when she came back, she brought David with her. So next picture. Oh, well, first of all, when Carlene was here, Carlene had horses in her blood too. And that's a picture of her in a parade here in Ahahee. Approximately 1980. Okay, Charlie? This is David and Carlene's wedding on the East Fork of the Trinity River in Siskiyou County. Okay, Charlie? They had 2 boys, Rayleigh and Emil. Another picture, Charlie? There's toward graduation. The older one is the one in the Navy. He's still stationed. He's in his 23rd year. In the Army, they call you a sergeant of arms. In the Navy, they call you something else, but that's what he is. In 23 years, he's never drawn his weapon. He is, just like his mother and his grandmother, he just knows how to deal with people. He's just got the gift of dealing with people. Emil, you'll hear, I'll be talking about Emil. Emil had a very rough start, but he's doing really well now. Next, please. This isn't Carlene or Cora Sue, but this is 4 generations of Valadezes. There's David on the right, his father on the left, the younger son, Emil in the middle, and the grandson. I'm not sure, I think that's the first one. The first my great-grandson, your grandson. Anyhow, there's 4 generations of Valadezes. Next, please. Here's a picture on the left to right. That's Cora's brother, Kenny. Again, cousin Sharon, and then Cora, and then cousin Kelly. He's the one out of all those people in that picture, he's the one that we've, over the years, been closest with. He was a son of Keith. Next. One other person in the family, this is Cora and her brother Kenny, cousin Deanne. Deanne's mother was Mildred's sister. And her husband had a real tragic, I don't remember what it was, but he died all of a sudden. And Kenny and Deanne became a unit. They did all kinds of research. They couldn't find anything that said they shouldn't, so they got married. And but she died shortly thereafter also. Okay, one more. This is my Trinity Alps family. Starting on the left, that's Carlene. Then next is the oldest grandson, Aurelie, and his wife, Kyoko. He was first stationed in Japan. They dated for 9 years. Of course, he was sent all over the world, so he wasn't around a lot. But they dated for 9 years before they got married. The next in the cowboy hat, that's Uncle Wally. We'll talk about him a little bit more. He was best friends with Cora's brother. Then next comes Megan, that's Emil's wife, and then Emil, and then David standing up in the back, and me and Cora, and then Cora's brother and Cora's wife, Kenny's wife. So that's our family unit. We all from the mountains. Okay, that's the end of the genealogy. So next picture, please, Charlie. Before I really start, I want to show you, this is a picture of the Trinity Alps. It come out of a book. The book is over there on the table. Reading is off the map to the right. Weaverville is off the map down to the south. But I'd like to show you. This is Trinity Lake. This is Coffee Creek, is right here. I'm going to talk about a resort. We went to, our first date was at a resort. Oops. I messed it up. Is it all gone? Anyhow, I just want to, the Trinity Alps is just unbelievable. Cora's brother was very instrumental in getting it declared a wilderness area. And in the beginning, it was just I can't remember all the steps it went through. But anyhow, it's just, you can't imagine. It's just totally raw. There's one of the pictures out there, the one of the mountains, that's from that resort I was pointing at, which will come up in the story here. But anyhow, I wanted to give you that background. So this is my love story. As mentioned before, I met Howard Palmer the day I arrived in Coffee Creek. Next, come spring, I met the daughter, Carlene, during spring break. I lost my place. A year and a half later, I was introduced to Cora Sue. Her brother's wife brought her to where I was living, supposedly to see a horse that he had given to my first wife, George. We had a 32-year-old Clydesdale. I mean, he smart, strong, but he was old. But anyhow. So then it was another year and a half before, I lost my place again here. Then it was a year and a half later before I met Cora Sue. Next picture, please, Charlie. The next time I saw her was on New Year's Eve, 1974 into 75, at a party at her brother. Her brother owned a resort at this time. And here's a picture. I had a date. My date, there's on the lower left-hand corner. And then next to me is Cora. Then there's Uncle Wally. Cora had come with 3 friends, a gay couple, and of course you see Wally's got his hand around. Wally he's something else. But he and Kenny grew up together. They started out at a boys' club in San Francisco. And the guy who owned the boys' club bought a piece of property in Coffee Creek and turned it into Coffee Creek Ranch. And they would do boys for 2.5 months in the summer, and then they'd open it up in the fall and in the spring to families. So that's how that's how Wally got into our family. At one point, Cora and I stepped out on the little deck off the office to have a smoke. And I don't know when I really realized it, but there was energy. There was that night, even though I was there with another date, I knew that something was going on with this woman. And so anyhow, Cora was living in St. Helena because when Howard was fading, she had to support the family. So that's why she moved back to the Bay Area. So she'd come up a couple times a month and bringing food and supplies. Well, sometime that spring, she got a message from God. Those are her words. She got a message from God to move back to the mountains. But she argued with God, and she said, well, if I'm going to move back to the mountains, you've got to give me work. You've got to give me enough work that I can support my family. After 2 trips to Coffee Creek in April, she had secured 3 jobs. She was cleaning house for her brother. Brother had a resort of about 8 cabins. She was cleaning house. She worked 1 day a week as a cook at another resort real close to me. And then there was a brand new grocery store opening, so she clerked in the grocery store. On June 5th, 1975, I just happened to be working at her brother's resort. In '74, there was a flood, and he had a log bridge across Coffee Creek that got washed out. We were rebuilding the bridge. I don't know why, but Cora drove into the parking lot, and I just was standing there, opened her door, and that's the way it started. Well, I mean, that's the way it continued, actually. The rest is history. When it came time for dinner, they sent Cora and I off to the local bar restaurant to buy hamburgers and bring back for everybody. She spent the whole time trying to convince me to go back to my first wife. I had actually filed for divorce New Year's Eve in '74. Our courtship began in church. I was like the service associate. I did everything in the church but preach. I had hair down to here. I got a picture of it. But they wouldn't let me preach. But, you know, I led the song. Well, Uncle Wally was the organist. And he and I did the music together. And then I'd read the scripture and all that sort of thing. So our relationship started, where are we? Anyhow, our relationships innocently started by making smiles and eye contact in church. And it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks later, we started meeting on Sunday afternoons. We'd go sit in the front lawn at my house and discuss theology. With all of her jobs, she only had Tuesday evenings and Sunday afternoon. That was the only time she wasn't working. This went on until about late July when I decided to invite Cora and Carlene out to dinner at another resort. There's a picture of it over there. I showed you on the map. You got to drive 21 miles into the middle of the wilderness, but there's a resort there and had a dinner house. There was a guy there by the name of Ken from the church who started heckling me and saying, you guys are on your first date. And I kept saying, no, I brought the daughter. I mean, no, it's not a date. I brought the daughter. Well, of course, the daughter found a ride home with somebody else, and that was our first date. The courtship continued into late August. About a month later, one Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves discussing living together. So we called up Carlene, invited her up for dinner, and asked her what she thought. She was fine. Carlene and I, she was really smart, and we got along really good. And she didn't have any problem at all, you know. So 2 days later, they moved in. Well, no, wait a minute. I told them, I said, okay, well, let me think about it for 24 hours. Let me make sure this is what I want to do. By the first thing in the morning, I knew what I wanted. So I saddled my horse, I caught Cora on her way to her job and said, let's do it. And then 2 days later, they moved in. However, about 3 weeks later, Cora came home one day in the middle of her shift. She walked right by me to lay down on the couch, holding her gut. Thus began a 7-month diagnostic process, which included abandoning the local doctor. We had a local doctor, Dr. Graham, who was a Stanford Binet person. I don't know if you all know who they were. Really smart people that they studied for over the course of their lifetime. But he had terrible bed manners. I mean, his office was a disaster. But anyhow, his original diagnosis ended up being closer than anybody else's. It also included in the 7 months was a sleepwalking event where she got up in the middle of the night, went sleepwalking, and we were living in a 100-year-old mining cabin, and she didn't go down the steps. She went to the thing and fell right down, landed on her tailbone, messed her up pretty bad. Also, she had to repeat a 3-week fast in preparation for a GI. And it snowed 2 feet in Coffee Creek. It snowed 8 inches in Redding. Even if we had got out and got to Redding, you couldn't get around in Redding. But that wasn't happy. She had to fast for another 3 weeks to get another appointment. The gynecologist shut down her entire reproductive system while the other doctors looked at her gut, trying to figure out what was wrong there. The final diagnosis was endometriosis. However, that wasn't right. When they opened her up, she had a cup of pus on each ovary. So total hysterectomy. They took everything out. And then she's laying in the hospital, and the doctor comes in and says, I have to apologize. I nicked your bowel when I was in there. So this set up a 20-year process. It mentioned in there, she studied diet. She studied every kind of diet, you know, and things like that, trying to make her digestive system work better. But now let's return to the timeline back in 1975. They moved in right at the end of August. On November 8th, we were awakened at 7 a.m. with a phone call from the Shasta County Sheriff's Department. Howard had been shot. We didn't get out of bed till 11 o'clock. A lot of crying, a lot of hugging. But then when we did get up, we had to go tell Carlene because she was sleeping in the cabin outside. Well, she didn't take that real well. It was real hard. She saddled the horse and disappeared. She was gone for most of that day. But by the end of that day, Cora said, you marry me now or I'm moving out. So next slide, Charlie. We were married November 29th, 1975, by a professor of mine. Well, we'll go into that. But anyhow, we went back to Berkeley and were married in Berkeley. Then following her 1976 surgery, our house burnt to the ground. I'll read you what it said, but it's not true. After building a new house, I amputated my left thumb in March 78 while building a new house for Cora's brother. That's way oversimplified. The fire was in December. We started our house in January. unemployment ran out in May. We had to move in, ready or not. We worked on the house all summer. Her brother came along and just loved our house. He just, oh, I want you to build me a house. But he didn't want us to design it. He went to Reading and got an architect. Ended up being I guess we didn't have a picture of it, a typical San Francisco two-story house with the living area upstairs. All the bedrooms were downstairs, but on the side of a mountain. Anyhow, when we started his house, my house wasn't done. So for about 5 months, I worked at him 40 hours a week, but I go home every night and work on my house, 4 or 5 hours. Never worked on Sunday, but I worked all day Saturday. Well, that's how the amputation happened, 9:30 at night. Cora had given up. About 7:30, she just said, I've had it, I can't do no more. And she went home. And pretty soon here we come in her brother's car to take me down to the Reading. And anyhow, let's see. But as I mentioned before, that set up the spec house, which gave us the opportunity to come to Ahihi. And that's when cousin Sharon, introduced David. One day David shows up. We didn't know nothing about it. David showed up one day with 7 horses and food and booze. And so we rode down the beach to his property. He's got a piece of property, 5 acres out west of Ahihi. And we went up, there's the only brown hill with a white cross on it. It's right out there at the west end of town. So that was our introduction to David and to that piece of property. The cross isn't on his property. His is right next door. They were married in the summer of 1981 in the East Fork of the Trinity River. In 1983, one morning, this is when we had ran out of work. We were busy until 83. We went back to Coffee Creek, finally finished our house, and we were all sitting around eating. We were all on food, Cora wouldn't let us get food stamps, but we got commodities. We lived on rice and cheese for several months. So finally one morning, Carlene woke up and she said, she's pregnant. She says, this baby wants to be born in Mexico. So we got everything together and a dog and sent them off to Mexico. And they went like in June, and then the baby was born July 10th, I believe. And it was a home birth. She found a midwife, and they had the baby born in Sharon's house, no problem at all. But then in 1987, Carlene's water broke 1.5 months early with the second child, Emil. He really wanted to live. He wanted out. He was born with about 50% of a functioning bowel. Went into surgery immediately. They spent 2 weeks in the Stanford hospital, went home for a week, went back in the hospital for a week, 10 days. And then finally, cousin Sharon I won't do that. Cousin Sharon owned a piece of property up in Round Mountain. And so that is where Carlene and David took both boys. And that was just perfect. Out of the way, away from everybody. It was a great way to raise the kids. But it was very difficult. Emil was very difficult. He never got full. You couldn't get him full. He couldn't eat anything but Sanilac. And he just never got full. And he cried all the time. Carlene would be at her house till 2, 3 in the afternoon and couldn't handle it anymore. She'd bring him over to cousin Sharon's house, and we'd take care of it for a few hours. But in the end, he turned out great. He's very healthy right now. He's healthy and the father of 2 boys. However, in 2016, Carlene was diagnosed with lung cancer. She had started smoking as a young child. She had quit about 6 years prior, but it was too late. They gave her, I was with her the night that they gave her the thing. They said 2 weeks. I gave her 2 weeks to live. She lasted 8 months. Well, we left that doctor's office and went over to the chemo office, and she comes storming out of the chemo. I said, no, I'm not doing that. No way. She tried every homeopathic natural thing that she could find. She lasted 8 months before she died. And finally, Cora Sue suffered and died of vascular dementia. That means that the blood vessels supplying the brain are just shrinking, just going away. There was no dementia in her family at all. With the help of the caregiver group here in Ahahik, I learned or came to the realization that the most problematic cause was too much anesthesia. She had several surgeries in about a 5-year period. She had one hip, then the other hip. She had a bowel section. She had a 12-inch bowel resection. She had a myxoma, a non-malignant tumor in the left ventricle. Plus she did all kinds of eye things. She had her eyelids raised. Then when they did that, they found out that as you get old, the retina pulls away. I mean, the sac pulls away from the retina, only she had a place where it didn't pull away. So she had a blind spot there. But so they did that, cataract surgery. Anyhow, this April, David and I made a trip back to Northern California. David still owns property there, and there were electrical and plumbing problems. And I went and cleaned out a storage shed to sort of complete our move here. I still got stuff at the grandson's house, but as I boxed up the shipping containers, I collected a few pictures of Cora. And I was able to put this together in a well, I got to have the story. Cora died the very day that David and I returned, on the 2nd of May this year. And so I had enough pictures, I was able to put that together for the graveside service. I became increasingly amazed at her smile, her beaming smile. Slowly, as the grieving process began, I found myself asking, where was all this beautiful countenance coming from? Especially in light of all these challenges I've laid out for you. But in the end, her smile won me over. Charlie? We were together, we were together 47 years and 11 months. Cora Sue was the love of my life. I never wavered, I never regretted, I never doubted that she was the woman of my dreams, the one for me. In the end, I have nothing but joy and gratitude for her sharing her life and her love with me. At this point, I'd like to ask Devorah to read a second reading. Yep, I have it. I had it. Where did I put it? It's in we weren't able to get everything on the computer, so.
Okay. Bear with me, it's very small print and I haven't seen it. I'm going to hold it here, excuse me. The fourth communion is with the angel of eternal life, who brings the message of eternity to man. For he who walks with the angels shall learn to soar. You should have given me this ahead of time. shall learn to soar above the clouds, and his home shall be in the eternal sea, where stands the sacred tree of life. Do not wait for death to reveal the great mystery. If you know not your heavenly Father while your feet tread the dusty soil, there shall be naught but shadows for thee in the life that is to come. Here and now is the mystery revealed. Here and now is the curtain lifted. Be not afraid, O man. Lay hold of the wings of the angel of eternal life and soar into the paths of the stars, the moon, the sun, and the endless light, moving around in their revolving circle forever, and fly toward the heavenly sea of eternal life. May it be so. Thank you.
That is from the Essenes. But everything so far, that is not the end of the story. Back to her life story. Her last sentence, she said, "For the most part, I have enjoyed my life, definitely trusting God and my intuition." Cora was a most amazing woman. Although I've presented many of her skills, there is more. Some of this you've already heard. She was a weather person. For many years, she was a spotter. In all three of our houses, she was a spotter for the National Weather Service. But she was a weather person. Beyond that, she was really good at predicting weather. She would always say, "I can be wrong 90% of the time, just like them." Her intuitiveness was especially helpful in caring for animals. Remember, she studied animal husbandry in college. She actually treated and cured a cat of cat fever. Unheard of. You just don't do that. But she nursed this cat back to life. And right down the line, dogs, cats, horses, just anything. It was just wonderful. Excuse me. Another characteristic of Cora Sue that most people would overlook, she was very, very intelligent. She'd get very upset. Occasionally I would call her a dumb blonde. Even though she was not dumb, she was a master of acting at it, playing that part when it served her well. However, back to the section of what others said. That's where I didn't read the grandson. The grandson, the oldest grandson, wrote her a letter, and I'll read to you. "So you're learning to play the harp. I wish you the best of luck, even though I know you'll pick it up in no time flat, because you are always been good at learning new things." And then I wanted to repeat what the good friend Joyce said. No, Joyce's sister, actually, her comment. "We will always remember you as the intelligent, fun to be with friend." But the final proof of her intelligence was one fall. It was late October. I sent her out to paint the skirting around a mobile home that we'd installed on a permanent foundation. And it was cold, probably too cold. She ended up with some minor frostbite on one of her hands. So that was it. She quit. She didn't want to work no more. So she went and got disability and therefore was eligible for retraining. They set her up with a vocational counselor at the College of the Siskiyous in Weed, 40 miles away. She spent almost 2 months every week going to this man. Every week he would give her some different kind of aptitude assessment. When it was over, the final report showed that her intelligence was very, very high. Cora was a psychic. She was a very spiritual person, but she didn't think much of church or organized religion. She was a witch. What I've come to learn is a woman in total control of herself. Thanks to the group, the caregiver group is where I got that. Cora was an excellent judge of people, and she possessed an incredible bullshit meter. She always saw through anyone not telling the truth, especially me. She was able to be comfortable with and make other people comfortable with her, no matter who they were, and she was always able to easily go to great depth with whomever she met. Perhaps her greatest gift to me was her constant insistence on be here now. Like in the second reading, she did not care much for deferred gratification. She was constantly pushing me to be in the moment. We almost never talked about the afterlife, but I have no doubt that Cora Sue is hanging on the wings of the angel of eternal life, soaring into the paths of the stars, the moon, the sun, and the endless light moving around in her revolving circle forever, and flying toward the heavenly sea of eternal life. Thank you all. Matt?
Let me close with these words from Mark Bellatini, a Unitarian Universalist minister and friend of mine. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, memory to memory, story to story, blessing to blessing, strength to strength, gratitude to gratitude, spirit to spirit, love to love. The wheel turns over, and what comes out of the earth returns to it now in peace. May we all go in peace. Blessed be.